the warning ignored. The discovery happened on a Tuesday, though the Velcran Empire did not measure time the way humans did. Their warship, the Crimson Talon, was conducting routine patrol sweeps through the outer reach when the sensors detected something unusual. A signal, weak and ancient, pulsing from a dead star system that had not supported life in millennia. Captain Vorgith ordered the investigation. His crew spent 3 days excavating the source from the frozen surface of a rogue planet drifting through the void. What they found was a beacon, a monument of crystal and metal that had somehow survived 15,000 years of cosmic radiation and gravitational chaos. The technology was beyond anything in the Velcran archives, beyond even the oldest civilizations they had conquered and absorbed into their empire. The beacon contained a message. It took the Empire's finest cryptographers and linguists 2 months to decode the ancient script. The language belonged to the Archons, a species that had ruled half the galaxy when the Velcran ancestors were still primitive creatures fighting over territory with clubs and stones. The Archons had built wonders that defied physics. They had created artificial worlds and harnessed the power of black holes. They had been gods among the stars. And then they had vanished. Every last one of them, gone without explanation. Their cities stood empty. Their ships drifted as silent monuments in the darkness. No bodies were ever found. No records explained their disappearance. They simply ceased to exist as if reality itself had erased them from existence. Now, after 15,000 years, they had left a message. Supreme Commander Thrax stood in the council chamber of the Imperial warship Eternal Glory, surrounded by holographic projections showing the translated text. His scales, dark purple and battle-scarred, reflected the blue light as he read the words for the 7th time. The message was simple, almost primitive in its directness. 23 words in the Archon language. 23 words that had survived the death of stars. We who ruled 1,000 suns send this warning across time. Do not attack the humans. They will deny you every final opportunity. Thrax's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the message. Around him, the military council sat in silence. These were the greatest warriors of the Velcran Empire, commanders who had crushed 100 rebellions and conquered 50 species. They had never known defeat. The concept was as foreign to them as mercy or compassion. General Korthas, oldest of the council members, spoke first. His voice carried the weight of 300 years of military service. Supreme Commander, the Archons were the greatest power this galaxy had ever known. If they felt compelled to leave this warning, we must consider it carefully. Thrax turned to face the general. His expression showed neither fear nor concern, only mild irritation. The Archons are dust, General. Whatever destroyed them, it was not these humans. We have studied them extensively. They are a young species, barely 500 years into space travel. They control merely 34 colony worlds. Their largest military vessel is smaller than our escort frigates. Admiral Sethrak, commander of the Northern Fleet, gestured toward the holographic display. Yet the Archons specifically named them Supreme Commander. How did an extinct civilization know about a species that would not exist for thousands of years after their disappearance? The question hung in the air. Thrax had considered this puzzle many times since the translation was completed. The Archons had possessed technology far beyond current understanding. Perhaps they had seen the future somehow, or perhaps they had encountered early human ancestors and made predictions. It did not matter. What mattered was reality, and reality showed that humans were weak. The Archons had many enemies, Thrax said. Perhaps the humans were one of them. Perhaps this warning was left as a final act of spite, meant to protect a primitive species they favored. Or perhaps the message is corrupted, mistranslated, or simply a deception. We waste time debating the warnings of ghosts. He pulled up another display, this one showing current intelligence on human space. 34 worlds glowed green against the star field. Small trading stations dotted the routes between them. Human merchant vessels moved along predictable paths, carrying goods and passengers. They were organized and industrious but not threatening. Their military consisted of patrol ships designed to combat pirates, not wage war against empires. The humans have become a problem, Thrax continued. Not a military problem, but an economic irritation. They refuse to acknowledge our authority. They trade freely in our space without paying the required tribute. They ignore our regulations and tie up our legal systems with endless bureaucratic challenges. They are like parasites, too small to kill but annoying enough to demand attention. Commander Vorith of the Intelligence Division activated his own presentation. Charts and graphs filled the space above the council table. The humans have cost us approximately 3 million credits in lost tribute over the past decade. Their legal challenges have consumed thousands of hours of administrative time. They operate with a level of organized resistance that suggests coordination at the highest levels of their government. They mock us, Thrax said quietly. The words carried more weight than a shout. A species of primitives treats the Velcran Empire as if we are equals to be negotiated with, rather than masters to be obeyed. This cannot continue. If we allow the humans to defy us, others will follow. The Empire is built on respect earned through strength. We must remind the galaxy what happens to those who challenge us. General Korthus shifted uncomfortably. Supreme Commander, if we attack the humans and the Archon warning proves accurate, we risk unknown consequences. Perhaps we should attempt further diplomatic pressure before resorting to military action. Thrax's tail lashed behind him, a sign of barely controlled anger. We have attempted diplomacy for 10 years, General. The humans smile and nod and promise to consider our requests, then do nothing. They are masters of saying yes while meaning no. They waste our time with words while continuing their defiance. I am finished with diplomacy. He turned to face the full council. I propose a limited military strike. We will target one of their smaller colonies, a world with minimal military value but significant symbolic importance. We will give the population time to evacuate, then destroy the infrastructure completely. This will demonstrate our seriousness without requiring a full-scale war. The humans will understand that continued defiance has consequences. The council debated for 3 hours. Some supported immediate action. Others urged caution. A few suggested alternative approaches, economic sanctions or blockades. But Thrax was Supreme Commander, and his word carried ultimate authority in military matters. When the vote was called, the decision was made. The Velcran Empire would strike at humanity. The target was selected carefully. Haven's Rest was a farming colony, the seventh world settled by human expansion efforts. It supported a population of 800,000, mostly agricultural workers and their families. The world produced grain and vegetables that supplied 3 other human colonies. It had minimal defenses, just a small orbital station and a handful of patrol craft. It was perfect. Before the attack was authorized, protocol demanded one final attempt at diplomatic resolution. The Velcran Empire prided itself on following proper procedures, even when dealing with inferior species. Ambassador Chen was summoned to meet with Supreme Commander Thrax aboard the Eternal Glory. She arrived in a small diplomatic shuttle, unarmed and unescorted. Ambassador Chen was a woman in her 60s, with gray hair tied back in a simple style and eyes that held both intelligence and sadness. She had served as humanity's primary liaison to the Velcran Empire for 8 years. She understood their culture, spoke their language fluently, and had spent countless hours attempting to find common ground between 2 very different civilizations. Thrax received her in the ship's formal greeting chamber. The room was designed to intimidate, with high ceilings that made visitors feel small and walls displaying weapons taken from conquered species. The Supreme Commander stood at his full height, nearly 3 meters tall, his ceremonial armor polished to a mirror shine. Ambassador Chen, he said, his voice carrying the formal tone used for official pronouncements. You have been summoned to receive the final terms of the Velcran Empire regarding humanity's continued presence in our space. Chen bowed respectfully, the gesture precise and proper according to Velcran custom. Supreme Commander Thrax, I am honored by this audience. I hope we can find a resolution that benefits both our peoples. The time for negotiation has ended, Thrax said. For 10 years your species has operated in our space without proper authorization. You have refused to pay required tribute. You have ignored our regulations. You have challenged our authority at every opportunity. This behavior will no longer be tolerated. He activated a holographic display showing Haven's Rest rotating peacefully in space. In 72 hours our fleet will arrive at this world. Your people will have 24 hours to evacuate all personnel. After that time, we will destroy every structure, every farm, every facility on the surface. This world will serve as a message to your government about the consequences of defying the Velcran Empire. Chen's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something cold and ancient that made even Thrax pause for a moment. Supreme Commander, she said quietly, I must ask you to reconsider this action. Not for our sake but for yours. Is that a threat, Ambassador? It is a warning, Chen said. She reached into her diplomatic pouch and pulled out a data crystal. We received a message 3 months ago. An ancient transmission that had been traveling through space for 15,000 years. I believe you have seen it as well. Thrax's scales tightened. The Archon warning. You dare to threaten us with the words of a dead civilization? I threaten nothing, Supreme Commander. I simply ask you to consider why the Archons felt it necessary to leave that message. They were the most powerful civilization this galaxy had ever known. They could have warned against any species, any threat. They chose to warn against us. Against humans. Please think about what that means. It means nothing, Thrax said, but his voice lacked complete conviction. The Archons are gone. Whatever they feared no longer matters. Chin placed the data crystal on the table between them. That crystal contains everything we know about the Archon disappearance. We have studied it extensively. We have theories. If you attack Haven's Rest, you will discover whether those theories are correct. I pray to whatever gods you believe in, Supreme Commander, that you choose differently. She turned toward the door, then paused. The Archon message says we will deny you every final opportunity. Do you understand what that means, Commander? Do you understand what they were warning you about? Enlighten me, Ambassador. Chin looked back at him, and in that moment, Thrax saw something in her expression that unsettled him deeply. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was pity, pure and profound, the kind of pity one might feel for a child about to make a terrible mistake. Your species values death and combat above all else, she said softly. The warrior's end, glorious and final. You build your entire culture around that one perfect moment. The Archons understood this. They understood what we would do if attacked. They tried to warn you, but I see their message fell on deaf ears. What will you do, Ambassador? Your military is no match for ours. That is correct, Supreme Commander. We cannot defeat you in conventional warfare. But the Archons did not warn you about conventional warfare. She opened the door, then delivered her final words. 72 hours, Commander. You still have time to choose differently. I hope you will. She left. Her shuttle departed the eternal glory 20 minutes later, heading back toward human space. Thrax stood alone in the greeting chamber, staring at the data crystal she had left behind. He considered reviewing its contents, then dismissed the idea. The humans were trying to manipulate him with fear and mystery. He would not give them that satisfaction. The fleet departed on schedule. 40 warships, the entire Southern Battle Group, led by the Eternal Glory itself. They traveled for 3 days through the void, their destination programmed and inevitable. Thrax spent those days reviewing battle plans and considering the message he would send to humanity after Haven's Rest was destroyed. He did not look at the data crystal. He did not reconsider his decision. He was Supreme Commander of the Velcrin Empire, and he had made his choice. The humans would learn respect or they would learn nothing at all. The fleet arrived at Haven's Rest exactly 72 hours after Ambassador Chen's departure. The small farming world hung in space before them, peaceful and undefended. Thrax stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the green and blue planet. Somewhere down there, 800,000 humans were going about their daily lives, unaware that their world had been marked for destruction. He opened a communication channel that would broadcast to every receiver on the planet's surface. His face appeared on screens in homes, schools, hospitals, and farms. 800,000 humans stopped what they were doing to listen. People of Haven's Rest, Thrax announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Your government has defied the Velcrin Empire. They have refused to acknowledge our rightful authority over this region of space. They have challenged our laws and ignored our demands. This defiance has consequences. He paused, letting his words sink in. You have 24 hours to evacuate this world. Take what you can carry. Leave everything else behind. Evacuation ships are being permitted to depart without interference. After 24 hours, this world will be destroyed completely. Every structure will burn. Every farm will be ash. This is the price your government has chosen to pay. Use your time wisely. The transmission ended. Thrax watched as chaos erupted on the planet below. Emergency broadcasts activated. People began rushing toward spaceports. The evacuation had begun. But there were 800,000 people on Haven's Rest. The world had perhaps 50 ships capable of orbital flight, and most of those were small cargo vessels. Even working at maximum capacity for 24 hours, they could evacuate maybe 100,000 people. The rest would remain behind, trapped and helpless. Thrax felt no remorse. This was war, and war required sacrifice. The humans had chosen this path when they refused to respect Velcrin authority. Every death would be on their hands, not his. 24 hours passed. The evacuation ships departed, overloaded with refugees who had abandoned everything they owned. They flew past the Velcrin fleet without incident as promised. Thrax watched them go, tiny vessels carrying fragments of a broken population. When the deadline expired, 700,000 humans remained on Haven's Rest. They gathered in city centers and community halls. Some prayed to their various gods. Others held their families close. Many stood outside, looking up at the sky where the Velcran fleet hung like a constellation of death. "Begin bombardment," Thrax ordered. The first plasma strikes hit at dawn. The capital city of New Providence simply ceased to exist, replaced by a crater of molten glass. The agricultural processing centers followed, then the spaceports, then the residential districts. The bombardment continued for 6 hours, systematic and thorough. Every target on the planet's surface was destroyed. 700,000 humans died. Some instantly vaporized in the initial strikes. Others slowly, trapped in burning buildings or poisoned by the toxic atmosphere created by the bombardment. By sunset, Haven's Rest was a dead world, its green fields replaced by black ash, its blue oceans choked with debris. Thrax stood on the bridge and watched the destruction with satisfaction. The message had been sent. The galaxy would see what happened to species who challenged the Velcran Empire. Humanity would have no choice but to surrender now, to accept their proper place as subordinates paying tribute to their betters. He opened a communication channel to Velcran Central Command. Mission accomplished. Haven's Rest has been neutralized. I estimate humanity will offer formal surrender within 1 week. Request permission to return to home port. Permission was granted. The fleet departed, leaving behind a world of the dead. Thrax retired to his quarters, satisfied that he had done his duty. He expected medals and commendations. He expected humanity to be broken and defeated. He was wrong about everything. The first sign came 3 days after the bombardment. A human trade vessel was scheduled to dock at Velcran Station 12. It never arrived. The station sent inquiries. No response. They sent search ships. They found nothing. Then another human ship vanished. Then another. Within a week, every human vessel in Velcran space had simply disappeared. No distress signals. No communications. They were there one moment and gone the next, as if erased from existence. Thrax ordered reconnaissance missions to human space. The scouts departed with confidence and returned with confusion. Human colonies appeared abandoned. Stations were dark and silent. Cities that had held millions now stood empty. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of where everyone had gone. Billions of humans had simply vanished. What is happening? General Corthas demanded during an emergency council session. Where are they? What are they planning? Thrax had no answers. This was unlike any military response he had ever encountered. Enemies fought back or surrendered. They did not simply disappear. He sent more scouts deeper into human territory, beyond the known colonies into the unexplored regions where humans were rumored to have secret facilities. None of those scouts returned. They did not send distress signals. They did not report attacks. Their transmissions simply stopped, as if they had flown off the edge of the universe itself. Weeks became months. The silence from humanity grew heavier, more oppressive. It was like waiting for a storm that never came, watching dark clouds gather but never break. The Velcran Council began to worry. They sent messages to Thrax demanding explanations. He had none to give. 3 months after Haven's Rest, the silence ended. Thrax was reviewing intelligence reports when the alarms began. Red emergency lights flooded the bridge of the eternal glory. Officers shouted over each other, their voices rising in panic. Something impossible was happening. Report. Thrax roared. Commander Vorath pulled up tactical displays, his hands trembling. Supreme Commander, we are receiving simultaneous alerts from across the Empire. Human ships have appeared at 17 of our worlds. They came from nowhere. No faster-than-light signatures. No warning. They simply appeared like they were always there and we just noticed them. Thrax studied the displays and his blood turned cold. The human ships were unlike anything in their intelligence files. These were not the small patrol craft humanity had possessed 3 months ago. These were massive vessels, kilometers long, with configurations that hurt to look at. Their shapes seemed wrong, as if they existed in more dimensions than normal space allowed. And there were thousands of them. Impossibly, incredibly, there were thousands of them. More ships than humanity had possessed 3 months ago. More ships than could have been built in 3 months. More ships than should exist. How is this possible? Thrax whispered. No one answered. No one could answer. They could only watch as the impossible human fleet surrounded 17 Velcran worlds simultaneously, cutting them off from the rest of the Empire. The war had begun. But it was not the war Thrax had expected. It was not the war anyone had expected. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the ancient Archon warning pulsed its message, patient and eternal. Do not attack the humans. They will deny you every final opportunity. Supreme Commander Thrax was about to discover exactly what those words meant. The price of arrogance. The first battle reports arrived within the hour, and every single one contradicted what Thrax understood about warfare. The Velcron fleet stationed at the 17 targeted worlds had responded exactly as their training dictated. They had formed defensive formations, powered up their weapons, and engaged the human vessels with overwhelming force. Nothing happened. Plasma cannons fired their superheated bolts directly at human ships. The energy simply passed through the vessels as if they were ghosts, dissipating harmlessly into space. Missile salvos tracked perfectly to their targets, then detonated against nothing. Nuclear warheads exploded in brilliant flashes that illuminated the human ships but did not damage them. It was as if the human vessels existed in a different reality, visible but untouchable. Then the humans fired back. Their weapons did not behave like conventional armaments. There were no energy beams or projectiles. Instead, something reached out from the human ships, invisible and incomprehensible, and touched each Velcron vessel. Wherever that touch fell, technology simply stopped working. Engines went dark. Weapons systems failed. Life support continued, but every combat-related system shut down instantly and completely. Within 2 hours of first contact, every Velcron military vessel at 17 worlds was disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. The crews sat helplessly in their dead ships, alive and unharmed but utterly powerless. They could do nothing except watch as human ships descended toward their planets, passing through orbital defenses that might as well have been decorative for all the resistance they offered. Thrax watched the tactical displays with growing horror. Red icons representing disabled Velcron ships filled the screens. Blue icons showing human vessels multiplied impossibly. The numbers made no sense. The technology made no sense. Nothing made sense anymore. Supreme Commander, Admiral Sethrak's voice came through the communication system, tight with barely controlled panic. All 17 worlds report the same result. Our fleets are completely disabled. The humans are landing ground forces on every targeted world. What are your orders? What were his orders? Thrax had spent 300 years in military service. He had commanded fleets in dozens of campaigns. He had studied every major battle in Velcron history. None of it prepared him for this. How did you fight an enemy that could not be touched? How did you resist a force that could disable your technology with a gesture? Order all remaining fleets to converge on the Imperial homeworld, Thrax said finally. We defend the capital with everything we have. Send emergency requests to our allies. We need reinforcements immediately. The orders went out. Across the Empire, Velcron warships began moving toward their homeworld, abandoning outposts and colonies to concentrate their strength. Messages flew to allied species requesting aid. The Velcron Empire had helped crush rebellions and conquer territories for dozens of other civilizations. Now it was time to call in those debts. While the military mobilized, Thrax finally did what he should have done months ago. He retrieved the data Crystal Ambassador Chen had left behind and loaded it into his personal console. If humanity had information about the Archon disappearance, he needed to see it. Perhaps somewhere in that data was the key to understanding what was happening. The crystal contained thousands of files, research documents spanning decades of human investigation into the Archon mystery. Thrax began reading, and with each document his dread grew deeper. The humans had theories. They had evidence. And they had come to a conclusion that turned Thrax's understanding of the universe inside out. According to human researchers, the Archons had not been destroyed by an external force. They had not been conquered or wiped out by disease or disaster. Instead, they had transcended. The Archons had developed technology so advanced that they had moved beyond physical existence entirely. They had become something else, something that existed in dimensions humans called higher space. But transcendence had not been instantaneous. The process took time, sometimes centuries. During that transition period, the Archons had possessed abilities that seemed like magic to species still bound by normal physics. They could manipulate matter with thought. They could exist in multiple places simultaneously. They could reach into normal space from their higher dimensions and alter reality itself. And according to the human files, humanity had begun that same process 200 years ago. Not all humans had transcended. Most remained normal, physical beings. But a small percentage, growing larger each generation, had started developing abilities similar to what the Archons once possessed. The humans called them evolved and kept them hidden from the rest of the galaxy. Until now. Until the Velcran Empire had forced their hand by attacking Haven's Rest. Until 700,000 humans had died, and humanity decided it was time to show the galaxy what they truly were. Thrax felt sick. The Archon warning suddenly made perfect sense. They will deny you every final opportunity. The Archons had known. They had seen their own future reflected in humanity's potential. They had tried to warn the younger species of the galaxy about what would happen if humanity was pushed to reveal themselves. A communication signal interrupted his reading. The bridge officer's voice trembled. Supreme Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They are requesting to speak with you directly. Thrax straightened his uniform and composed himself. He would not show fear even facing the impossible. Put them through. The main view screen activated, showing Ambassador Chen's face. She looked exactly as she had during their last meeting, calm and sad, but now there was something else in her expression. Resignation, perhaps, or grief for what was about to happen. Supreme Commander Thrax, she said quietly. I warned you. I begged you to reconsider. You chose not to listen. What are you? Thrax demanded. What have you become? We are what the Archons became, Chen replied. We are humanity, evolving beyond the physical limitations that bind most species. We did not want this confrontation. We wanted to develop quietly, to transcend peacefully without interference. But you killed 700,000 of our people. You forced us to act. Then act, Thrax snarled. Destroy us. Burn our worlds as we burned yours. Take your revenge and be done with it. Chin shook her head slowly. No, Commander. We will not destroy you. We will not burn your worlds. That would make us what you are, and we have worked very hard to become something better. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. 700,000 humans died on Haven's Rest. Each one of them was a person with dreams, families, futures. You took all of that away to make a point about power and respect. Now we will make our own point, and you will live long enough to understand it. What do you mean? The Archons warned you that we would deny you every final opportunity, Shin said. Your species values death and combat above all else. The warrior's end, glorious and meaningful. You build your entire culture around that one perfect moment when you fall in battle defending something you believe in. That is your final opportunity, Commander. Your chance to die with honor. Thrax felt cold understanding spread through his body. And you will deny us that. Yes, Shin said simply. We will keep you alive. All of you. Every single Velcran in your empire. You will not die in battle. You will not have your glorious end. You will live and live and live no matter how desperately you try to escape that fate. And while you live, you will change. You will become something different than what you are now. Whether you want to or not. The transmission ended. Thrax stood alone on the bridge, surrounded by his officers, all of them staring at the blank screen. The threat was worse than death. It was the denial of death, the stripping away of everything that gave Velcran existence meaning. The human occupation proceeded with terrifying efficiency. On each of the 17 worlds, human forces established control without firing a single lethal shot. Velcran soldiers who charged at them found themselves paralyzed by invisible fields that locked their muscles in place. Civilians who panicked and fled were gently stopped and returned to their homes. Leaders who attempted suicide found human medical teams ready to revive them before death could take hold. Thrax ordered the defense of the homeworld with every ship at his disposal. 200 warships from across the Empire converged on Velcran Prime, the throne world that had stood unconquered for 5,000 years. They formed defensive shells around the planet, layered and overlapping, the greatest concentration of military force the Empire had ever assembled. The human fleet arrived on the 7th day after their initial appearance. They came as they had before, materializing from nowhere, their impossible ships sliding into reality like shadows forming in bright light. But this time there were not thousands. This time there were tens of thousands. The human fleet surrounded Velcran Prime in a sphere so complete that not even light could escape without passing near one of their vessels. Thrax gave the order to fire. 200 warships unleashed everything they had. The space around Velcran Prime lit up with weapons fire, enough destructive power to crack a moon or boil an ocean. The humans absorbed it all without response, their ships untouched and unmoved. Then, as before, the humans reached out. One by one, Velcran ships went dark. Engines failed. Weapons fell silent. Within 3 hours, the entire defensive fleet was disabled, 200 dead ships floating uselessly around their homeworld. Thrax watched from the ground command center deep beneath the capital city. His hands gripped the console so tightly that his claws left marks in the metal. Around him, the highest-ranking officers of the Empire stood in shocked silence. 5,000 years of military tradition had just proven completely worthless. "Ground forces," Thrax ordered, his voice hoarse. "Prepare for planetary defense. Every soldier to their positions. If they want this world, they will have to take it building by building, street by street." The soldiers mobilized. Millions of Velcran warriors took up positions throughout the capital and across the planet. They were ready to fight, ready to die defending their homeworld. This was what they had trained for their entire lives. This was their purpose, their honor, their final opportunity for glory. The humans landed without opposition. Their transport ships descended through the atmosphere in perfect formation, completely ignoring the ground-based weapons that fired uselessly at them. They set down in open spaces throughout the capital city, and from them emerged soldiers wearing simple armor that seemed too thin to provide real protection. Thrax personally led the defense of the government district. He stood at the head of 10,000 elite warriors, the finest soldiers the Empire had produced. They had fought in 100 battles. They had never retreated. They would not start now. The human soldiers approached in organized groups. They moved carefully, weapons held ready but not aimed threateningly. When they saw the Velcran force assembled before them, they stopped and a single human stepped forward. She was young, perhaps in her 30s by human standards, with dark skin and eyes that held both determination and compassion. "I am Captain Williams of the Human Evolved Corps," she announced, her voice amplified to reach the entire Velcran force. "We are here to assume control of this planet. You will not be harmed if you do not resist. Please lay down your weapons and return to your homes." "Never!" Thrax roared. He raised his ceremonial blade, the weapon that had been carried by his family for 40 generations. "We are Velcran. We do not surrender. We do not bow to conquerors. If you want our world, you will have to kill every last one of us." The Velcran warriors cheered and charged. 10,000 soldiers ran toward the human position, weapons raised, war cries echoing through the streets. This was their moment. This was their purpose. They would die as warriors should, fighting to the last breath. The humans did not shoot them. The paralysis fields activated when the Velcran force was still 50 meters away. 10,000 warriors suddenly found themselves unable to move, their momentum carrying them forward until they collapsed like toppling statues. Thrax fell face first onto the pavement, his blade clattering from his frozen fingers. He could not move. He could not speak. He could only watch as human soldiers walked among the fallen Velcran warriors, checking each one for injuries. When they found soldiers who had been hurt in the fall, they immediately began medical treatment. When they found officers carrying suicide pills, they confiscated them with gentle efficiency. The paralysis wore off after an hour. Thrax found himself in a comfortable medical facility, lying on a bed designed for his species' physiology. Human doctors had examined him and treated minor injuries he had sustained in the fall. They had even discovered an infection in one of his lungs that he had not known about and administered antibiotics to cure it. Captain Williams came to speak with him. She pulled up a chair and sat beside his bed, her posture relaxed and non-threatening. "Supreme Commander, I know this is difficult for you. I know that everything happening now contradicts your entire worldview. But please understand we are not here to hurt you. We are here to stop the cycle of violence that your empire has perpetuated for centuries." "You should kill me," Thrax said quietly. His voice sounded hollow in his own ears. "I ordered the attack on Haven's Rest. 700,000 of your people died because of my decision. I deserve execution." "You deserve justice," Williams corrected. "But justice does not mean more death. We tried that approach on Earth for thousands of years. We executed our war criminals and it never brought back the dead. It never prevented the next war. So we stopped killing and started trying to change people instead." "I cannot change," Thrax said. "I am what I am. A warrior. A killer. You would be better off ending my existence." Williams smiled sadly. "That is what they all say at first. Give it time, Commander. Give it decades. You would be surprised what time and patience can accomplish." Over the following weeks, Thrax attempted suicide 47 times. He tried every method he could imagine. Starvation, which the humans defeated with feeding tubes. Poison, which they neutralized with medical technology that could filter toxins at the molecular level. Holding his breath until he passed out, after which his body's autonomic functions took over. Beating his head against walls, which resulted in immediate sedation and healing. The humans stopped every attempt without exception. Their medical technology was far beyond anything the Velcrin Empire possessed. They could repair catastrophic injuries in hours. They could bring someone back from clinical death if they intervened quickly enough. And they were always watching, their surveillance systems detecting suicide attempts before they could succeed. After the 47th attempt, a human psychologist named Dr. James Morrison came to speak with Thrax. He was an older man with gray hair and patient eyes that had seen too much suffering. He sat across from Thrax in the small apartment where the Velcrin commander was being held. "Why do you keep saving me?" Thrax demanded. "Why not let me die and spare both of us this torment?" "Because death is easy," Morrison replied. "Death is the escape you want, the release from guilt and shame. But the people who died on Haven's Rest do not get to escape. They are gone forever. The only thing we can do for them now is make sure their deaths mean something. And the only way to do that is to keep you alive long enough to change." "I will never change." "You are already changing," Morrison said gently. 3 weeks ago you tried to kill yourself every day. This week you have only tried twice. That is progress." Thrax wanted to argue but he could not. The psychologist was right. The desperate urgency to escape through death had faded slightly. He still wanted to die, still felt he deserved to die, but the compulsion was not as overwhelming as it had been. "What do you want from me?" Thrax asked. "I want you to live," Morrison said. "I want you to see the consequences of your actions. I want you to meet the families of the people who died on Haven's Rest and hear their stories. I want you to understand, truly understand what you took from them. And then, after all of that, I want you to decide to become someone better than the person you were." "And if I refuse?" Morrison shrugged. "Then you live anyway. We keep you healthy and safe whether you cooperate or not. But I think you will cooperate eventually. I think the guilt you feel will motivate you to seek some kind of redemption, even if you do not believe redemption is possible." The psychologist stood to leave, then paused. "Supreme Commander, you led a warrior culture. You believed in honor and glory and meaningful death. But let me ask you something. Is there honor in killing 700,000 defenseless civilians? Is there glory in burning farms and schools? What was meaningful about those deaths?" Thrax had no answer. Morrison left him alone with the question, and it haunted Thrax through the long nights that followed. Months passed. The human occupation continued across all 17 Velcrin worlds, and reports began filtering back to the resistance leaders hiding on unoccupied planets. The reports described scenarios that seemed impossible, that contradicted everything the Velcrin understood about conquest and occupation. Humans were rebuilding the damaged infrastructure on occupied worlds. They were providing medical care to civilians. They were opening schools that taught both Velcrin and human subjects. Former soldiers were being given jobs, not as warriors but as builders, teachers, administrators. Children were growing up in an environment without military training, learning to create rather than destroy. Most disturbing were the reports about Velcrin who were beginning to accept the occupation. At first it was just pragmatists who cooperated for survival. Then came those who genuinely believed the human approach might be better. After a year, there were Velcrin who actively supported the humans, who had abandoned warrior culture entirely in favor of what they called a better way. Thrax heard these reports and felt his world crumbling. The humans were not destroying the Velcrin Empire. They were transforming it, changing it so completely that it would never return to what it had been. They were erasing the culture that had defined his species for thousands of years, and they were doing it without firing a single lethal shot. On the second anniversary of Haven's Rest, Dr. Morrison brought Thrax a visitor. She was a human woman in her 70s, with white hair and eyes that held deep sadness. Her name was Margaret Chin and she had lived on Haven's Rest. She had survived the bombardment by being off-world visiting her daughter. Her husband, 3 children and 7 grandchildren had all died in the attack. "Mrs. Chin asked to meet you," Morrison explained. "I told her it was not required, that she did not owe you anything. But she insisted." Margaret sat down across from Thrax. They looked at each other in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I wanted to see the person who killed my family. I wanted to understand what kind of being could make that decision." "I am a monster," Thrax said. The words came automatically, rehearsed through 2 years of therapy and self-recrimination. "I cannot give you your family back. I cannot undo what I did. I can only say that I am sorry, though those words are meaningless." "They are not meaningless," Margaret said. 2 years ago you would not have apologized. You would have defended your actions as military necessity. The fact that you can say sorry now and mean it shows that you have changed. Does that matter? Does my change bring back your husband? Your children? Your grandchildren? No, Margaret admitted. Nothing brings them back. But your change means their deaths accomplish something. It means you have become someone who would never again order such an attack. That is not enough, but it is something. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. It showed a large family gathered for a celebration, 3 generations smiling at the camera. This was taken 6 months before you killed them. I want you to have this picture. I want you to look at these faces every day. I want you to remember that they were real people with real lives that you ended. Thrax took the photo with trembling hands. He looked at the smiling faces and something broke inside him. Not his spirit that had broken long ago. Something deeper, some final wall he had built between himself and complete understanding. These people had been alive, had been happy, and he had erased them to make a political point. He wept. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. Margaret Chin sat silently and watched him cry. She did not offer comfort. She did not tell him it would be all right. She simply bore witness to his grief, and somehow that was more powerful than any words could have been. When his tears finally stopped, Margaret stood to leave. What happens now? Thrax asked. Now you live with what you have done, she said. You wake up every morning and look at that picture. You remember who they were. And you spend the rest of your life trying to become someone who honors their memory by never letting such a thing happen again. How long will that take? Margaret smiled sadly. The rest of your life, Commander. However long the humans decide that should be. She left. Thrax placed the photo where he could see it from his bed. 14 faces smiling at him, frozen in a moment of joy before he had taken everything from them. 10 years passed. The human occupation expanded to cover every world in the former Velcrin Empire. Resistance collapsed not through military defeat but through gradual acceptance. A generation of young Velcrin grew up without military training, learning instead to build and create and cooperate. They knew about their warrior heritage, but it seemed distant and strange to them, like ancient history rather than living culture. Thrax was released from confinement after 5 years. He was given a job teaching history at a university on Velcrin Prime. His subject was war, specifically the causes and consequences of violence between civilizations. He taught students about the Haven's Rest bombardment, using himself as an example of how good people could make monstrous decisions when caught in systems that valued honor over compassion. The work was difficult. Many students were angry at him, and some were children of warriors who had died resisting the occupation. But he continued teaching, continued sharing his story, continued trying to prevent future generations from making his mistakes. 20 years after Haven's Rest, Thrax received a message that Ambassador Chen had died. She had been 93 years old, dying peacefully in her sleep after a long life of diplomatic service. The funeral was held on Earth, and Thrax was granted permission to attend. He stood among thousands of humans and aliens who had come to honor her memory. Speaker after speaker told stories about her patience, her wisdom, her unwavering belief that even enemies could change if given enough time. When it was Thrax's turn to speak, he walked slowly to the podium. Ambassador Chen saved my life, he said to the assembled crowd. Not by preventing my execution. She saved me by refusing to let me die before I understood what I had done. She denied me the easy escape of death and forced me to face the consequences of my actions. I hated her for that. For many years, I hated her with every fiber of my being. He paused, looking out at the faces watching him. Human and Velcrin, young and old, all gathered to remember a woman who had believed in redemption. But she was right. The Archons were right. Humanity's greatest strength is not their technology or their evolved abilities. It is their stubborn refusal to let their enemies escape through death. They keep you alive until you cannot escape the truth any longer. Until you change because the alternative is living forever with the weight of your sins. He looked down at the photo of Margaret Chen's family, which he had carried every day for 20 years. I killed 700,000 people. Nothing changes that. Nothing redeems that. But because Ambassador Chen denied me death, I have spent 20 years trying to prevent others from making similar mistakes. In that time, I have taught 10,000 students about the cost of violence. Some of them will become leaders. Some of them will face decisions about war and peace. And because of what I taught them, maybe, just maybe, they will choose differently than I did. Thrax stepped down from the podium and took his seat. The ceremony continued, but he barely heard it. He was thinking about the ancient Archon warning, the message that had tried to save his species from their own pride. Do not attack the humans. They will deny you every final opportunity. He finally understood. The final opportunity was not just death. It was the chance to remain unchanged, to die believing you were right, to escape the burden of growth and transformation. The humans denied that escape. They forced their enemies to live, to change, to become something better than what they had been. It was the cruelest and most merciful thing he could imagine. And after 20 years, Thrax had to admit it had worked. He was not the same being who had ordered the bombardment of Haven's Rest. That person had died slowly over 2 decades, replaced by someone who understood the value of peace and the true cost of war. Supreme Commander Thrax no longer existed. In his place was Professor Thrax, teacher and reformed war criminal, living proof that even monsters could change if given enough time and enough reasons. He had been denied his glorious death in battle, denied his warrior's honor, denied everything his culture valued. And in losing all of that, he had found something he never knew existed. Not redemption, that was too much to hope for. But purpose. A reason to keep living that had nothing to do with glory or honor. A chance to prevent future atrocities by teaching the next generation about the ones he had committed. The humans had won. Not through superior weapons or military tactics, but through patience and mercy and the absolute refusal to let their enemies escape through death. They had transformed the Velcran Empire completely, turning warriors into builders, conquerors into teachers, a culture of death into a civilization of life. And the ancient Archons, dead for 15,000 years, had tried to warn everyone. They had seen what humanity would become. They had understood what would happen to any species foolish enough to attack them. The warning had been there all along, waiting in the darkness between stars. Do not attack the humans. They will deny you every final opportunity. Thrax had attacked them anyway. And they had denied him everything, especially the easy escape of death. They had forced him to live, to change, to become someone who could look at Margaret Chen's photo and feel genuine sorrow rather than military necessity. It was the worst punishment he could have imagined. It was the greatest gift he had ever received. And he would carry both for the rest of his very, very long life.